The Nazis never discovered that a midwife was hiding 27 Jewish babies in a clinic basement. Gwarostalsting, Emilia Novak Intro Krakow, March 14, 1943, 3:47 a.m. St. Mary's Maternity Clinic. Hauptsturmführer Heinrich Müller shoved the clinic door open with his boot, making the glass rattle in its frame. Behind him, 4 SS soldiers filed in with their rifles already raised. They'd received a specific tip. This maternity clinic was issuing forged birth certificates for Jewish babies, registering them as Polish Catholics. Müller had carried out 47 raids on hospitals and clinics over the past 6 months. He was an expert at spotting forgeries. Doctors always made the same mistake. Too many births recorded in too short a span, names that sounded too perfectly Polish to be natural, dates that didn't match documented pregnancies. At the reception counter, a 52-year-old woman in a midwife's uniform stood waiting, calm as stone. Emilia Novak. She had worked in this clinic for 31 years. Her reputation was spotless. Religious, conservative, known for turning away complicated cases that might put her license at risk. Papers, Müller ordered in German. Emilia handed over the birth register without the slightest hesitation. Müller flipped through it. 23 births in the last 3 months. Normal for a clinic this size. Properly Polish names. Dates spaced reasonably. Where are the mothers right now? Müller asked. 2 in the recovery ward on the 2nd floor. One gave birth 6 hours ago, the other 2 days ago. And the babies? In the nursery, 3rd floor. Müller sent 2 soldiers to check each area while he prowled through the rest of the building. He was looking for what he always looked for: mismatches between the number of occupied beds and the number of documented patients, medical supplies in quantities that didn't fit the procedures recorded, hidden spaces where Jewish women could be concealed. What Müller, what Kadi didn't know, what no Nazi officer in Krakow had ever discovered, was that directly beneath the spot where he stood, in a converted basement that officially didn't exist on municipal plans, 27 Jewish babies were breathing in near silence inside makeshift cribs. 27 babies who, according to Nazi records, had been stillborn or had never existed at all. 27 lives Emilia Novak had pulled out of the machinery of death with a surgical precision that made forging birth certificates look like amateur work. Because Emilia wasn't only issuing false papers, she'd built an entire system, a basement impossible to detect, with its own ventilation, a network of wet nurses feeding babies whose real names they would never learn. Catholic families waiting to adopt children they would someday be told carried a Jewish heritage, and a method that made Jewish babies vanish from every official record while simultaneously documenting them as Catholic from the moment they were born. Over the next 4 hours, Müller and his men would tear the clinic apart, searching for evidence they knew had to exist. They would measure rooms, comb through every file, interrogate every employee. And they would never find the basement. Because Emilia understood something most rescuers never did. You don't save Jews by hiding them. You save them by making them disappear completely and reappear as someone else. This is the story of how a 52-year-old Catholic midwife, working out of a maternity clinic in the very center of Krakow, saved not only 27 babies, but eventually 93 Jewish children during the Nazi occupation, using the birth registry system as a weapon against genocide. It's the story of how the most obvious place, a clinic where Nazis regularly checked newborn records, became the most effective hiding place, and how meticulous bureaucracy turned out to be stronger than organized violence. Would you comment on this video if you discovered your entire identity had been constructed to save you? If your Catholic birth certificate was a forgery so flawless That even you didn't know you were born Jewish? If the woman who handed you over to your parents had literally manufactured every document proving you existed legally. Because that is exactly what 93 children faced decades later, when secret archives revealed that their whole lives had been built on a necessary lie. That the midwife their adoptive mothers remembered fondly had been an architect of false identities more sophisticated than any intelligence operation. That they had survived the Holocaust without ever knowing they were its intended victims. Part 1. The Midwife of Krakow. Emilia Novak was born on September 3, 1890, in a small village near Krakow, the daughter of deeply religious Catholic farmers. Her childhood was shaped by a tragedy that would define her life. Her mother died giving birth to Emilia's youngest brother when Emilia was 12. The baby survived only 3 days. The village midwife, an elderly woman named Zofia, apologized to Emilia's father. The baby was positioned wrong. I didn't have the tools. I couldn't save him. Watching her brother die slowly from birth complications, Emilia made a decision that sounded impossible for a 12-year-old girl from a peasant family in 1902. She would become a midwife, but not a village midwife with informal training. A midwife with a real medical education, someone who could save the babies traditional midwives lost. It was an extraordinary ambition for a girl whose formal schooling had ended at 10. But Emilia had a kind of determination her father recognized as identical to his late wife's. When Emilia decided something, the universe eventually gave way. At 14, Emilia convinced the local doctor to hire her as a cleaning assistant in his clinic. She scrubbed floors in the mornings, watched procedures whenever she could, and read the doctor's medical books at night. By 16, the doctor, impressed by what she'd taught herself, accepted her as an informal apprentice. In 1910, at 20 years old, Emilia applied to the Krakow School of Midwifery. Her application was rejected. Insufficient formal education. Emilia spent the next year studying with relentless intensity, took equivalency exams, and applied again. She was accepted in 1911. The program was brutal. Anatomy, physiology, delivery techniques, obstetric emergency management, sterilization, basic pharmacology. Emilia was older than most of the students and came from a poorer background than nearly all of them. She still finished first in her class in 1913. Her thesis, Reducing Infant Mortality Through Improved Delivery Techniques, argued that most infant deaths during childbirth were preventable with proper technique and basic equipment. It was controversial because it implied that many traditional midwives, including the woman who had delivered Emilia's mother, were indirectly responsible for deaths that didn't have to happen. Emilia didn't apologize for that implication. If the truth offends, she wrote in her conclusion, then offending is a moral act when the alternative is unnecessary death. After graduation, Emilia worked for 2 years in a maternity hospital in Warsaw, gaining experience with difficult cases. Premature births, complicated presentations, severe hemorrhaging. She developed a reputation as the midwife who didn't lose babies. Her infant mortality rate was 2.3%, compared to a national average of 15%. In 1915, she returned to Krakow and accepted a position at St. Mary's Maternity Clinic, a small facility run by a Catholic religious order. The clinic served mostly poor women who couldn't afford larger hospitals. The pay was low, the facilities inadequate, but Emilia preferred it. The rich always find good medical care, she told a colleague. The poor need midwives who actually know what they're doing. Over the next 25 years, Emilia delivered roughly 2,400 babies. Her reputation grew, the midwife who never lost infants. the midwife who worked with the poor, the midwife who charged according to what a woman could pay. She also gained another reputation, less official but just as important. Emilia helped women in desperate situations, unmarried pregnant women facing social ostracism, women who had been raped, women rejected by their families. Emilia treated them without judgment, helped them find adoptive families when necessary, and, when necessary, falsified birth certificates to protect reputations. That last practice, issuing false certificates to shield unmarried mothers by registering babies as the legitimate children of married couples, was technically illegal, but socially tolerated. Emilia did it maybe 5 or 6 times a year. Local authorities knew and looked the other way. It was an act of charity, not a serious crime. What Emilia never anticipated was that this experience, learning how to forge birth documentation to protect single mothers from stigma, would become the tool she'd use to save Jewish children from genocide. By 1939, Emilia was 49. She had never married. Her work was her life. She lived modestly in an apartment near the clinic, attended Mass daily, and was respected in her community as a devout, competent woman devoted to her profession. When Germany invaded Poland on September 1st, 1939, Emilia watched with growing horror as the occupation tightened like a noose. Restrictions against Jews escalated month by month, and Emilia, who had delivered Jewish babies for decades, began to notice a terrifying pattern. Her former Jewish patients stopped coming to the clinic because clinics required papers, and papers identified Jews, and being identified as Jewish meant danger. In May 1940, Emilia took a home birth, something she had largely stopped doing years earlier, but agreed to under special circumstances. The mother was Jewish, the wife of a doctor Emilia knew professionally. The delivery was complicated, requiring an intervention that saved both mother and baby. Afterward, while Emilia cleaned up, the doctor, 45 years old, barred from practicing medicine because he was Jewish, asked her, "How do I register this birth? If I register him as Jewish, my son is already marked. If I don't register him, he doesn't exist legally." Emilia didn't answer right away, but the question haunted her for weeks because she understood what it meant. Every Jewish baby born under Nazi occupation was being born into a system designed, sooner or later, to kill them. And what if there was a way to extract babies from that system the moment they entered it? The idea was criminally bold. It was also professionally perfect for someone with Emilia's particular experience. Part 2. The Ghetto and the Birth. In March 1941, the Nazis established the Krakow Ghetto. Roughly 15,000 Jews were forced into a 20-block area in the Podgorza district. The conditions were predictably brutal: overcrowding, inadequate rations, disease spreading fast. But life continued with a terrible persistence. People still fell in love, still married, still had sex, and therefore still became pregnant. Pregnancy in the ghetto was both a medical and a moral catastrophe. The Nazis had formally forbidden Jewish births in occupied territories, a policy meant to ensure there would be no next generation. Pregnant women discovered in the ghetto faced forced abortions. Babies born in the ghetto were sometimes executed immediately, but the ban was enforced inconsistently. In Krakow, the ghetto administration was chaotic enough that births still happened, especially when the community managed to hide them. Jewish doctors inside the ghetto delivered babies in secret. Jewish midwives worked underground. Emilia knew several of those doctors. They had been colleagues before the occupation. In July 1941, one of them contacted her with a desperate message. "I have a patient, 7 months pregnant, placenta previa. She's going to hemorrhage during delivery. I need to do a C-section, but I don't have the equipment in the ghetto. Can you help?" It was an impossible request. Emilia worked in a Catholic clinic serving the non-Jewish population. Bringing a Jewish patient out of the ghetto required permits that were nearly impossible to obtain. Performing surgery without proper paperwork could cost her her license or her life. But Emilia knew what placenta previa meant. Without a C-section, both mother and baby would die. "Bring her to the clinic," Emilia said. 2 a.m., the back door. That night, Emilia performed the first unauthorized surgery of her career. The C-section succeeded. Mother and baby both lived. Emilia forged the record to show the patient was a Polish Catholic from a nearby village. No family, premature delivery. The baby stayed in the clinic for 2 weeks, while the mother recovered in the home of contacts outside the ghetto who hid her temporarily. Then, Emilia arranged an adoption with a Catholic family who had recently lost their own baby. She forged a birth certificate showing the child as that family's biological son. It was a complete rescue system executed in 2 weeks. Extraction from the ghetto, life-saving surgery, a new identity, adoption, reintegration into Polish society as a Catholic. Emilia saw the potential immediately. She could do this systematically. Over the next months, Emilia developed a refined protocol. Step 1. Identification. Doctors in the ghetto identified high-risk pregnancies, serious medical complications, mothers weakened by starvation, situations where a ghetto delivery would likely mean death. Step 2. Extraction. Women were smuggled out using forged medical passes, typically disguised as Polish workers facing obstetric emergencies. Emilia had a contact in the ghetto administration, a corrupt Polish official who accepted bribes to issue temporary passes. Step 3. Delivery. Emilia handled the birth in the clinic, always at night when fewer staff were present. She registered the mother as Maria Kowalska, or something similar. A generic Polish name, a fake address, no family that could be contacted. Step 4. Separation. After the birth, Emilia recorded the baby as stillborn if the mother returned to the ghetto. Or she registered the baby as the child of a Catholic adoptive family if the mother died or couldn't return. False death certificates for the stillborn babies went into the archives. False birth certificates for the adopted babies were issued. Step 5. Placement. Babies were placed with pre-vetted Catholic families. Emilia kept a list of childless couples or families who had recently lost children. She offered private adoption with minimal paperwork. Most families never knew the babies were Jewish. The system worked because Emilia controlled the documentation at every point. As a licensed midwife, she had legal authority to issue birth certificates. As an employee of a religious clinic, her records were rarely questioned. As a 51-year-old woman with an impeccable reputation, no one suspected she was running a sophisticated rescue network. In the second half of 1941, Emilia saved 6 babies using the system, but it had a fatal limitation. It worked best 1 baby at a time. What happened when several women needed help simultaneously? Or when a baby had to stay in the clinic for weeks because of prematurity or medical complications? Emilia needed a place where she could keep multiple babies at once without the clinic staff or Nazi inspectors discovering them. She needed a hiding place, not for adults, for babies, potentially dozens. Part 3. Building the basement. St. Mary's Maternity Clinic had been built in 1887 in a 3-story building that had originally been a private residence. The ground floor held reception, 2 exam rooms, and an administrative office. The second floor had 4 private recovery rooms and 1 shared ward with 6 beds. The third floor contained the nursery, a supply room, and a small apartment where Sister Agnes, the nun who ran the clinic, lived. What few people knew was that the building had a basement. Not a full basement, just a space about 4 meters by 6 meters beneath the kitchen, used decades earlier as a coal storage room. When modern heating was installed in 1925, the basement was sealed with concrete. Updated municipal plans didn't show it anymore, because technically it was no longer usable space. But Amelia knew it was there. She had seen the sealed entry in the kitchen, a 1 square meter slab of concrete, slightly different in color from the surrounding floor. In December 1941, Amelia proposed an idea to Sister Agnes. "We need more storage space, medicines, supplies. What if we reopen the old basement?" Sister Agnes, a practical 67-year-old who had run the clinic for 30 years, considered it. "Who will pay for the construction?" "I will," Amelia said. "I've saved money." "Why would you spend your savings on storage for the clinic?" Amelia chose partial honesty. "Because I'm going to use that space for things that can't be kept in the public areas of the clinic." Sister Agnes studied her with a sharp, penetrating gaze. The two had worked together for 26 years. Agnes had watched Amelia quietly help women in trouble, occasionally forge documents, bend rules when morality demanded it. "Legal things?" Agnes asked at last. "Moral things," Amelia corrected. "Not always the same." Agnes was silent for a long moment, then said, "Don't tell me exactly what you're planning, but if you need that basement, open it." It was tacit permission for a clandestine operation. Agnes didn't know the details, but she understood Amelia intended something that required secrecy. Amelia hired a builder she knew, a 58-year-old man who had done repairs at the clinic before. She paid him extra for speed and discretion. The job took 2 weeks in January 1942. He removed the concrete sealing the entrance, cleared out decades of rubble, installed a wooden staircase descending from the kitchen, and reinforced the walls and ceiling to ensure structural stability. But Amelia's specifications went far beyond simple storage. Ventilation. He installed ducts linking the basement to the building's existing ventilation system. Fresh air would flow passively. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to keep the space habitable. Lighting. He extended electrical wiring from the kitchen to the basement and installed 3 lights with switches both upstairs and downstairs. Sound insulation. The walls were lined with improvised dampening materials, old blankets, thick cardboard, anything that absorbed noise. Not perfect, but it reduced sound transmission. A hidden entrance. The removed concrete slab was replaced with a wooden trap door covered with linoleum that matched the kitchen floor exactly. When closed, it was almost invisible. Only someone who knew precisely where to look would notice the faint seam where the trap door met the floor. Furnishings. Amelia installed everything herself. 6 used cribs bought discreetly, a changing table, medical cabinets with basic supplies, a comfortable chair for nighttime feedings, and a small heater for the winter. Total cost, 850 zlotys, the equivalent of 4 months of Amelia's salary, nearly all her savings. When it was finished, Amelia had a secret 24 square meter space directly beneath the clinic kitchen, accessible only through a concealed trap door, capable of holding 10 to 12 babies at a time under acceptable conditions of ventilation, temperature, and lighting. Officially, the basement didn't exist. It wasn't on the plans. No municipal record documented it. No clinic staff knew it existed except Sister Agnes, who had tacitly agreed not to ask questions. The first real test came 3 weeks after the work was completed. Part 4. The First Babies, February 1942. Dr. Jakob Steiner, a Jewish physician working clandestinely inside the Krakow ghetto, contacted Amelia urgently. "I have 4 pregnant women, all with serious complications. 1 has diabetes, 2 are severely malnourished, 1 has preeclampsia. They'll deliver in the next few weeks. In the ghetto, the babies won't survive. The mothers probably won't either." 4 was more than Amelia had ever handled at once, but refusing meant the likely death of 8 people. "Send them," Amelia said. 1 at a time, spaced 2 days apart. Over the next 2 weeks, the 4 women were extracted from the ghetto using forged medical passes Amelia had obtained through bribes. Each arrived disguised as a Polish worker with an obstetric emergency. Amelia delivered the babies at night, when the clinic was nearly empty. 3 were complicated vaginal births. 1 required an emergency C-section, which Amelia performed with Sister Agnes assisting. The nun didn't ask why the patient lacked proper documentation. All 4 babies survived. 3 mothers survived as well and were returned to the ghetto after the bare minimum of 3 days recovery. 1 mother died of postpartum sepsis, an infection Amelia couldn't control with the limited antibiotics available. Now Amelia had 4 babies who officially did not exist. All of them needed continuous care for at least 2 weeks before they could be placed with adoptive families. Amelia moved them into the basement. Over the next weeks, she established a routine she would keep for the next 3 years. 5 a.m. Amelia went down before the clinic staff arrived, fed the babies formula she'd prepared the night before, changed diapers, checked vital signs. 8 a.m., 6 p.m. Amelia worked normally at the clinic, treating regular patients. During the day, the babies stayed quiet. Well-fed, comfortable babies rarely cry nonstop. 6:30 p.m. After most of the staff left, Amelia went down again, fed the babies, held them one by one. Human touch is crucial for infant development. She hummed soft Polish lullabies. 10 p.m., the last feeding before midnight. Amelia prepared formula for the next morning, cleaned the basement, checked that the trap door was perfectly sealed. 2 a.m. Amelia woke and went down for the night feeding. It was physically brutal, but necessary. Newborns need to eat every 3 to 4 hours. It was exhausting beyond description. Amelia slept about 4 hours a night, broken into fragments. But the babies thrived. All 4 gained weight. None developed serious infections. After 3 weeks, Amelia had placed all 4 babies with Catholic adoptive families. Each family received a forged birth certificate showing a fictional Polish Catholic mother who had died in childbirth, making adoption necessary. The families believed they were saving war orphans. They didn't know they were saving Jewish babies from genocide. The system had worked. But Amelia saw the growing problem. She was the only person caring for the babies in the basement. What if she got sick? What if she was arrested during a raid? What if the Nazis inspected the clinic while she wasn't there? The babies would die underground, undiscovered until it was too late. Amelia needed help, but recruiting helpers meant exposing the operation. Every additional person increased the risk of betrayal, discovery, collapse. After weeks of weighing her options, Amelia identified 3 people she trusted absolutely. Sister Agnes. The administrator already knew Amelia was using the basement for moral things that aren't legal. Agnes was 67, had devoted her life to religious service, and believed deeply in the sanctity of infant life. Emilia recruited her directly. "I'm saving Jewish babies. I need your help." Agnes answered without hesitation. "What do you need me to do?" Zofia Kowalska, a 44-year-old nurse who had worked at the clinic for 12 years. Emilia knew she was discreet, reliable, deeply Catholic. More importantly, Zofia had lost 2 of her own children, one to pneumonia at age 3, another stillborn. Emilia gambled that this pain would make Zofia willing to help save children. Emilia first brought her in indirectly, asking her to assist with special cases at night without explaining. Zofia proved unwavering. After 2 months, Emilia told her the truth. Zofia cried, then said, "Finally, I can do something that matters." Anna Wisniewska, a 19-year-old cleaner from a farming family. Anna couldn't read, but she was intelligent, observant, quiet. Emilia noticed she never gossiped, never asked unnecessary questions, and worked with painstaking care. Recruiting Anna was a bigger risk. She was young, potentially impulsive. But Emilia needed someone who could be in the clinic at odd hours without raising suspicion. A cleaner working late fit perfectly. Emilia showed her the basement. "These babies will die if the Nazis find them. I need you to help keep them safe. Can you keep a secret even under torture?" Anna, terrified but determined, nodded. "I can." With 3 helpers, Emilia set up a shift system so the babies were never unattended for more than 3 hours. Emilia, 5 a.m. to 8 a.m., 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. Sister Agnes, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. Zofia, 12 p.m. to 2 p.m., during lunch when her absence wouldn't be noticed. Anna, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. After finishing cleaning, it was redundant by design. If one person couldn't make a shift, another could cover. And if Emilia was arrested, the babies wouldn't die unattended. By June 1942, the basement routinely held 6 to 8 babies at once. By September, 10 to 12. The operation had scaled from occasional rescue to an industrial system of infant survival. And then the day Emilia had feared arrived. The first Nazi inspection of the clinic. Part 5. The first inspection. October 3rd, 1942, 10:15 a.m. Oberscharführer Werner Koch and 2 SS soldiers arrived at St. Mary's maternity clinic without warning. Koch carried a folder of directives from Berlin. All medical facilities in occupied territories were to be inspected regularly to verify compliance with racial laws. Specifically, Koch had to confirm that no Jewish woman was receiving medical treatment, that no Jewish baby was being born in Aryan facilities, and that no Jewish staff were employed. Emilia was with a patient when the receptionist, a 35-year-old woman who knew nothing about the basement, ran to her in panic. "The SS are here. They're inspecting." Emilia felt her blood turn to ice. There were 9 babies in the basement at that moment. If the Nazis found them, they would all be killed. Emilia, Agnes, Zofia, and Anna would be executed. The clinic would be shut down. But Emilia had prepared for this. She had a plan. She excused herself and went down quickly under the pretext of fetching supplies from the kitchen storage. In the basement, 9 babies lay in their cribs. 2 were awake, making soft sounds. The others slept. Emilia gave the 2 awake babies a mild sedative, carefully dosed to induce deep sleep without harm. She checked that everyone was fed, dry, comfortable. Then she closed the trapdoor and covered it with a box of potatoes to erase the outline completely. Then she went upstairs to find Koch waiting at the reception desk. "I am Emilia Novak, chief midwife," she said in functional German. Koch nodded coldly. I need to inspect the entire facility. Birth records for the last 6 months. Documentation for all staff. Now, for the next 2 hours, Coach and his men checked every centimeter of the clinic. They inspected the second floor. 4 postpartum patients, all Polish Catholics with proper papers. Koch questioned each one briefly about family origin, husband's ethnicity, any Jewish ancestry. All answered in ways that satisfied him. They checked the third floor. The nursery held 5 babies, all newborns belonging to the mothers upstairs. Koch verified that the birth certificates matched the babies present, and that the dates aligned with the mother's recovery states. They examined administrative records. Emilia handed over the ledger showing 47 births in the past 6 months. Koch studied it meticulously, searching for suspicious patterns, Jewish-sounding names, an unusual clustering of births, any discrepancy. He found nothing because Emilia was meticulous. The Jewish babies in the basement never appeared in official records. They were recorded as stillborn or never registered at all. The certificates Emilia issued for adoptive families were fabricated from scratch, often created months after the actual birth with altered dates. Finally, Koch inspected the ground floor, including the kitchen. Emilia watched him walk directly over the hidden trapdoor. Beneath his boots, 9 Jewish babies slept in drugged silence, hidden under wood covered in linoleum and a box of potatoes. Koch noticed the box. "What's that?" "Potatoes," Emilia said. "Kitchen storage." Koch nudged the box with his boot. He saw linoleum without any obvious marks. He didn't see the trapdoor seam because the construction was precise. The lines were nearly invisible. "Do you have a basement?" Koch asked. "No," Emilia lied without blinking. "The building was built without one. You can check the municipal plans." Koch considered checking the plans, then decided it wasn't worth it. He'd inspected dozens of clinics. This one looked clean. At 12:45 p.m., Koch finished the inspection. "Everything appears to be in order, but we will return for surprise inspections. If we find violations, this clinic will be closed and the staff arrested." After they left, Emilia waited 10 minutes before going down. The 9 babies were still asleep, breathing normally. The sedative had worked perfectly. Emilia sat in the feeding chair, shaking hard with delayed adrenaline. They had been centimeters from discovery. One baby crying at the wrong moment. Koch deciding to move the potato box completely. Any tiny deviation, and they would all be dead. That night, Emilia gathered Agnes, Zofia, and Anna. "It worked this time, but they'll come back. We need an inspection protocol." They built a system, early warning. The receptionist, still unaware of the basement, was instructed to alert Emilia immediately whenever any German official arrived. That would give Emilia 2 to 3 minutes to prepare the babies. Sedation. Emilia would keep mild sedatives in the basement at all times. During inspections, every baby would be sedated to prevent crying. Camouflage. The trapdoor would always be covered with large supply crates. Potatoes, vegetables, sacks of flour. Anything that made sense in a kitchen. Cover story. If asked directly about a basement, all of them would deny it. If asked about strange sounds, they would blame old plumbing. Emergency plan. If the Nazis discovered the basement, Agnes would claim full responsibility, insisting Emilia, Zofia, and Anna knew nothing. It was a lie, but it might save some lives. The system would be tested 14 more times over the next 2 years. Every time it worked. But the stress piled up like rust, quietly corroding everything. Part 6. The expansion. By the end of 1942, demand exceeded capacity. Dr. Steiner in the ghetto contacted Emilia weekly with new pregnant women needing help. But the basement could only hold 12 babies comfortably. And the full process, delivery, stabilization, placement with an adoptive family, usually took 3 to 4 weeks per baby. The math was brutal. With space for 12 babies at once and an average stay of 3 weeks, Emilia could process roughly 48 babies a year. But there were hundreds who needed help. Emilia had to expand, but expansion required resources she didn't have. More physical space, more helpers, more adoptive families, more money for bribes and supplies. In January 1943, help came from an unexpected source. Father Wojciech Zielinski, a 56-year-old priest from St. Stanislaus Parish, approached Emilia discreetly after Sunday Mass. "Sister Agnes told me about your work," he said quietly. "Not the details, only that you're saving Jewish children. I want to help." Emilia, cautious, asked, "What kind of help?" "I have families in my parish, couples without children, families who've lost children. They want to adopt, but legal adoption is nearly impossible during the war. You could place babies with them." It was exactly what Emilia needed. But there was a complication. Are these families willing to adopt Jewish children? Father Zielinski hesitated. "Some will if you ask them directly. Others won't. But they would adopt without knowing the baby's origin. Is that acceptable?" Emilia wrestled with the ethics. Placing Jewish babies with families without revealing the truth meant the children would grow up without knowing who they really were. But the alternative was death. It's acceptable, she decided. Survival first. Identity later. If we survive the war. Father Zielinski built a network of adoptive families through his parish and neighboring parishes. He identified 23 Catholic families willing to adopt with minimal questions. Some knew the babies were Jewish and accepted them specifically for moral or religious reasons. Others believed they were taking in Polish war orphans. With more adoptive families available, Emilia sped up placements. The average time in the basement dropped from 3 weeks to 2. Annual capacity rose from 48 to 72 babies. But even that wasn't enough. In March 1943, the liquidation of the Krakow ghetto escalated dramatically. The Nazis began mass deportations to Auschwitz and Plaszow. Dr. Steiner contacted Emilia in desperation. "They're going to liquidate the ghetto completely. I have a list of 16 pregnant women. They'll all be deported to camps where their babies will be killed at birth. Can you get them out?" 16 was impossible. Emilia had space for 12 babies at most, and caring for 16 pregnant women at once would overwhelm the clinic entirely. Emilia made a decision that would sharply raise the risk, but felt morally unavoidable. "Bring all 16 out. I will take them." Over the next 3 weeks, 16 pregnant women were smuggled out in small groups using forged medical passes. Emilia temporarily placed them in safe houses run by a Catholic resistance network, connected through Father Zielinski. As each woman went into labor, she was brought to the clinic. Emilia delivered babies at night, often 2 or 3 births in a single night. It was physical and mental exhaustion beyond anything that could be adequately described. Of the 16 mothers, 14 survived childbirth. 2 died of complications. Of the 16 babies, all survived initially, but 3 died in the first weeks due to prematurity and complications tied to maternal malnutrition. The 13 surviving babies were placed with adoptive families over the next 6 weeks. Each received a completely forged birth certificate. Each was documented as Catholic from birth. By May 1943, Emilia had saved 47 Jewish babies since the operation began. But at that scale, the work drew unwanted attention. Rumors began spreading through the Polish community. Sister Agnes's clinic was arranging private adoptions with minimal documentation. Some people wondered why so many mothers died in childbirth at that particular clinic. Others noticed Emilia looked permanently exhausted, working impossible hours. In June 1943, a Polish collaborator, an informant for the Gestapo, contacted the clinic asking about private adoption availability. Emilia, instantly suspicious, replied that the clinic did not handle adoptions. But she knew suspicion had been triggered. She needed to become more cautious. Over the next months, Emilia reduced the number of babies in the basement to a maximum of 6 at any given time. She spaced placements more deliberately and rotated adoptive families through multiple parishes. The operation continued, but with heightened caution. And then, in March 1943, came the inspection that nearly destroyed everything. Part 7. The day of the full inspection. March 14th, 1943, 3:47 a.m. Hauptsturmführer Heinrich Müller and 4 SS soldiers arrived at the clinic without warning. It was deliberate. Night inspections caught violations that daytime inspections missed. Emilia had just finished the 2 a.m. feeding in the basement. 11 babies were down there, more than she dared to hold at once in months. She had gone back up, sealed the trapdoor, and was in the small staff resting room on the first floor when she heard violent pounding on the main door. Her heart stopped. A night inspection was the worst-case scenario. It meant the Nazis suspected something specific. Emilia hurried down, opened the door. Müller didn't wait for an invitation. He pushed inside. "Operating documents for this clinic," he ordered. Emilia handed them over while her mind raced. 11 babies in the basement. 2 had been fed 45 minutes ago. They would be awake for the next 2 to 3 hours. If they cried while the Nazis were in the kitchen, the basement would be exposed. Müller split his men, 2 to the second floor to inspect patients, 1 to the third floor to check the nursery. Müller himself stayed with Emilia to examine the records. For the next 2 hours, he went through everything with obsessive care. Birth records for the last 18 months. Death certificates for babies who had died, staff documentation, financial logs. He was looking for patterns, and he found them. The infant mortality rate in this clinic, Müller said, pointing, is abnormally high. 8 babies recorded as stillborn in the last 6 months. The national average is 2 or 3 for a clinic of this size. Emilia had prepared an answer. "We treat high-risk patients, poor women without adequate nutrition, medical complications without proper prenatal care." It was true. Emilia genuinely treated high-risk cases. But it was also cover for Jewish babies she had recorded as stillborn to erase them. Müller wasn't convinced. "I also see a strange pattern in adoptions. Multiple babies placed with adoptive families after mothers died in childbirth. No relatives claiming the babies. No verification of the mothers' identities." Emilia stayed calm. During the war, many refugees arrive without full documentation. They give birth here. If they die and there is no family, we arrange adoptions so infants don't end up in overcrowded orphanages. How do you verify these mothers are who they say they are? We can't always. We prioritize saving lives over verifying papers. It was the kind of answer that could be read as bureaucratic incompetence or excessive compassion, both minor concerns compared to deliberate sabotage of racial policy. But Müller remained suspicious. At 5:30 a.m., he ordered a full physical search of the facility, including storage areas. Emilia felt a cold, sinking terror. 11 babies in the basement. The 5 a.m. feeding was coming. Soon they'd start getting restless. Miller personally inspected the kitchen. Emilia followed, forcing herself to look cooperative, while her mind scrambled for options. Miller noticed the vegetable crate, on top of the trapdoor. What's underneath that? The floor, Emilia said. Miller moved the crate. He saw linoleum. He tapped the floor with his boot, listening. It sounded slightly hollow, because there was empty space beneath. This sounds hollow, Miller observed. Emilia improvised. Old plumbing, pipes under the floor. It creates a strange resonance. Miller considered it. Then, to Emilia's absolute horror, he ordered a soldier, "Rip this floor up. I want to see what's underneath." It was the final decision point. If the soldier tore up the linoleum, he would find the trapdoor. If he opened it, 11 Jewish babies would be discovered. All of them would be killed. Emilia, Agnes, Zofia, and Anna would be executed. But then Sister Agnes, who had been watching from the hallway, stepped forward with a kind of brilliance that was almost unreal. "Herr Hauptsturmführer," she said in surprisingly fluent German, "if you tear up the floor of my kitchen, who will pay for the repairs? This is a religious institution operating on a limited budget. We cannot pay for damage caused by an inspection without specific evidence of wrongdoing." It was an appeal to Nazi bureaucracy. Miller now faced a dilemma. He could destroy property on suspicion, but if he found nothing, he would face paperwork explaining needless damage to religious property. Miller hesitated. Then, almost unbelievably, he decided it wasn't worth the trouble. "We will leave the floor intact," he said, "but this clinic will remain under observation. We will return without warning. If we find any violation, it will be closed immediately." When the Nazis finally left at 7 a.m., Emilia collapsed into a chair, shaking. They had been a breath away from discovery. Only Agnes's intervention had saved the entire operation. That afternoon, Emilia gathered Agnes, Zofia, and Anna. "It was too close. We need to consider shutting down." Agnes shook her head hard. "And then what? We let the next babies die because we were afraid? No. We continue, but more carefully." She was right. Shutting down meant condemning every Jewish baby born afterward. Continuing risked discovery, but offered survival. They continued, with changes. Maximum babies in the basement reduced to 8. Placements accelerated, no more than 10 days instead of 2 weeks. Stricter case selection, only pregnancies with genuine complications that justified clinic treatment. A stronger early warning system with lookouts watching the street. For the next 18 months, the operation continued under extreme caution. There were 8 more Nazi inspections. None found the basement, but every inspection was a slow, grinding agony that wore them down. Part 8. The older children. In September 1944, Emilia's operation faced a new challenge. Older children. Until then, Emilia had worked only with newborns. Babies don't talk, they can't reveal their identities, and they can be documented as having been born to different mothers with relative ease. But now, as ghettos and camps were being liquidated, desperate Jewish families were trying to save children of all ages. Father Zielinski contacted Emilia. "I have a Jewish family. Mother, father, 2 children, ages 4 and 6. The parents know they won't survive. They want to save the children. Can you help?" Children of 4 and 6 came with problems babies didn't. They could speak and accidentally reveal their real identities. They remembered their biological parents and the trauma of separation. They required complex documentation, not just birth certificates, but entire life histories. They had to be prepared to live inside new identities. Emilia accepted because refusing meant certain death. But she had to transform her method completely. The parents brought the children to the clinic in disguise. Emilia hid them temporarily in the basement, the first time she had used the space for older children rather than infants. Over the next week, Emilia worked with them intensely. "Your name is Piotr Kowalski now," she taught the 6-year-old. "You were born in Lublin. Your parents died in a bombing. You don't remember much about them. Neighbors brought you here." She made him repeat the story dozens of times until he could recite it convincingly. Then she did the same with the 4-year-old, though the younger child understood less. The most heartbreaking part was teaching them to forget. "You can't talk about your real mom and dad. You can't speak Yiddish. You can't talk about anything before you came here. Do you understand? If you talk, bad men will find you." The 6-year-old understood with terrifying clarity. The 4-year-old only understood that he had to stay quiet about secret things. Emilia placed both children with a Catholic family in a village 40 kilometers from Krakow. She created completely forged birth certificates dated 1938 and 1940. She fabricated full medical histories, vaccinations, childhood illnesses, documented as if the children had lived with that family since birth. It was the most elaborate forgery she had ever produced. And it worked. Over the next 6 months, Emilia saved 12 more older children using the same approach. Each case required weeks of preparation in the basement, teaching new identities, extremely detailed documentation backdated by years, adoptive families willing to take children who might reveal dangerous secrets, and psychological guidance to help children process trauma while maintaining false identities. It was vastly more complex than delivering babies, but it was necessary. By January 1945, with the Red Army approaching from the east, Emilia's operation had saved a total of 93 Jewish children, 81 babies and 12 older children. And then liberation came. Part 9, The Legacy and the Revelation, January 17th, 1945. The Red Army liberated Krakow. The Nazi occupation ended after 5.5 years. Emilia, now 54, had survived. Agnes, Zofia, and Anna had survived too. The 93 children were scattered across Poland, living with adoptive families, documented as Catholics, unaware of their real origins. But liberation created a moral dilemma Emilia hadn't fully anticipated. What should happen now? Option 1. Reveal the truth. Contact the adoptive families, explain that the children were Jewish, facilitate reunions with any surviving biological relatives. Option 2. Keep the secret. Let the children continue as Polish Catholics, preserving the false identities permanently. There was no clean answer. Emilia consulted Jewish survivors who returned to Krakow. Some argued, the children must know who they are. Jewish identity must be preserved. Others argued, the children have stable lives now. Revealing the truth will traumatize them again. Leave them in peace. Emilia chose a compromise. She would keep meticulous records of every child she had saved. Real names, false names, adoptive families, any information about biological relatives. But she would not reveal anything unless a surviving biological family specifically searched for the child, or until the child was an adult capable of deciding what to do with the truth. She compiled those records in a ledger with coded entries. Real names written in Hebrew, a language she had learned at a basic level during the war. False names in Polish. Adoptive family information encrypted with a simple code. The book contained 93 entries. It was physical proof of 93 lives saved. It was also potentially devastating evidence if it ever fell into the wrong hands. Adoptive families could face legal questions over illegal adoptions. Children could face identity collapse. Communities could fracture. Emilia kept the ledger in a safe in her apartment. She shared it with no one except Father Zielinski, who agreed that if anything happened to Emilia, he would take custody of the book. In the years that followed, Jewish survivors occasionally contacted Emilia, searching for missing children. She consulted her ledger, checked the entries, and facilitated reunions when she could. She found biological family for 7 of the 93 children. The reunions were bittersweet. An 8-year-old boy was reunited with an aunt who had survived Auschwitz. The aunt wanted to take him. The adoptive family resisted. The case went to court, and the court ruled in favor of the adoptive family because the child had lived with them for 3 years and considered them his parents. A baby, now 4, was claimed by grandparents who had fled to Palestine before the war. The adoptive family surrendered the child voluntarily. The reunion was painful, but everyone involved called it right. A 6-year-old girl had an older brother who had survived a concentration camp. They wanted to reconnect, but the adoptive family had moved to a remote village. Emilia facilitated letters, but a physical reunion never happened. For the other 86 children, no surviving biological family could be identified. They continued living with their adoptive families, most with no idea of their true origins. Emilia kept working as a midwife until 1955, retiring at 65. She lived modestly, never married, and stayed in contact with Agnes, who died in 1958, Zofia, who emigrated to the United States in 1961, and Anna, who married and had 4 children. In 1963, a Polish reporter investigating wartime rescue stories heard rumors about a midwife who saved Jewish children. He contacted Emilia for an interview. Emilia, now 73, refused at first. But the reporter persisted, arguing the story needed to be documented before it vanished. Emilia eventually agreed. The interview was published in a local newspaper in 1964. It drew modest attention, but not widespread. Thousands of Poles had risked their lives to save Jews, and Emilia was one among many. But for the 93 children she had saved, the publication was a devastating revelation. Several contacted Emilia with anguished questions. Am I one of the children you saved? Are my real parents Catholic? Who am I? Emilia faced the nightmare she had always known would come. She had information that could shatter the identities she had built. She chose to handle it case by case. If the person asking was an adult who seemed able to carry the truth, Emilia consulted her ledger and revealed it if there was a match. If the person was a minor or seemed psychologically fragile, Emilia suggested waiting. If the adoptive family objected, Emilia respected their wishes in most cases. Over the next years, Emilia confirmed the identities of 23 of the 93 children. Each revelation unfolded differently. Case 1. A 28-year-old man learned he had been born Jewish and that his Catholic birth certificate was a forgery. He reacted with shock, then gradually explored his Jewish heritage, though he never fully abandoned his Catholic identity. I am both, he decided. Jewish by birth, Catholic by upbringing. Case 2. A 24-year-old woman confronted her adoptive parents. They admitted they had always known, but never told her. The relationship was permanently damaged by a secret kept for decades. Case 3. A 31-year-old man rejected the information completely. I don't care who gave birth to me. My parents are the ones who raised me. He never explored his Jewish heritage. For the other 70, Emilia was never contacted, or the truth was never revealed. They lived and died without knowing where they had come from. Emilia died in 1976 at 86. Her obituary mentioned her work as a midwife, her dedication to poor patients, and her role in rescuing Jewish children during the war. The ledger naming the 93 children passed to Father Zielinski, who died in 1983. The book was then donated to the Jewish History Museum of Krakow. In 1989, the museum published the full list of 93 names, both real and false. The publication triggered a wave of people asking, "Am I one of these children?" Verification was complex. It required comparing birth dates, locations, adoptive families. In many cases, the information wasn't enough to confirm identities with certainty. By 2010, researchers had confirmed the identities of 67 of the 93 children. The other 26 remain unidentified, their real identities lost in the chaos of wartime documentation, fading memories, and decades of secrecy. In 1985, Emilia Novak was posthumously honored by Yad Vashem as righteous among the nations. 14 of the children she had saved attended the ceremony, now adults in their 40s and 50s. One of them, a 47-year-old man who had discovered his Jewish heritage at 32, gave a speech. "Emilia Novak saved me twice. First, she saved my life. Then, decades later, she gave me my identity. I lived 32 years without knowing who I really was. Some would call that cruelty. I call it necessity. Because if she had told me the truth when I was 5, I would have revealed a secret that would have killed both of us." Emilia's story leaves questions with no easy answers. Is it right to save a child's life at the cost of their identity? Who has the right to the truth? The child who was saved, or the family that saved them? When does a necessary secret become a harmful lie? Emilia never claimed to have final answers. "I did the best I could with the options I had," she wrote in a personal diary discovered after her death. "I saved bodies. I couldn't save identities too. Maybe that makes my work incomplete. But incomplete work that results in life is better than perfection that results in death." The basement beneath St. Mary's Maternity Clinic still exists. The building is now a community center. The basement has been converted into a small museum commemorating Emilia's rescue operation. Visitors can descend the original wooden staircase, see reconstructed cribs, and imagine how 27 babies at a time breathed in silence while Nazis walked overhead. It is a deeply unsettling space. Not because of obvious horror. There are no gas chambers here, no crematoria. The horror is subtler. The normal clinic above, the secret basement below, the thin barrier between life and death. A plaque on the wall lists 93 names in 2 columns, Jewish names in Hebrew on the left, false Catholic names in Polish on the right. For 26 names, the right column is blank. They were never identified after the war. It is a reminder of what gets lost when survival requires erasing identity. The children lived. But who were they? Some eventually found out. Others never did. Others knew and chose not to explore it. The last word belongs to Anna, the young cleaner, who helped the operation, who gave an interview in 1998 at age 74. "People ask if what we did was right. Forging documents, lying to families, separating children from their heritage. The answer is, I don't know. What I do know is that 93 children who should be dead are alive. Some grew up happy without knowing the truth. Others suffered when they found out. But all of them grew up. They had lives. They loved. They were loved. That has to mean something. The Nazis never discovered that a midwife was hiding 27 Jewish babies in a clinic basement because they fundamentally underestimated the power of meticulous documentation as a weapon against genocide. Miller, the officer who nearly uncovered the operation, died in 1945 in battle against the Red Army. He never knew he had been inches away from finding the basement. The basement remains. The 93 names remain, some with full identities, others with fragments, some with permanent mystery about who they were before Amelia Novak transformed them into someone else. 24 square meters, 93 lives saved, complicated identities that resist simple categories. The Nazis built an industrial system to kill. Amelia Novak built a handcrafted system to save. It wasn't perfect. It left scars. It created moral dilemmas that still echo decades later. But 93 people lived who otherwise would have died. In the end, an imperfect life is better than a perfect death. And that is the legacy of the midwife who hid children in a basement. Survival bought at the price of identity, valued at the price of human life.